Welcome to the Startup Sessions, the #1 web show and podcast for trusting your gut, breaking the rules, and starting something meaningful, featuring in-depth interviews with acclaimed creative entrepreneurs that have succeeded at building their own remarkable businesses. Today's guest is a genius when it comes to starting creative businesses. Kari Chapin is with me today, and you're in for an incredible show because Kari and I really dig into some of the key aspects of getting a creative business, or any business for that matter, off the ground. We'll discuss some foundational aspects of starting your business, as well as Kari's process for building her community of followers and how to deal with too many ideas, or what Kari refers to as idea paralysis. And if you make excuses for why you can't build a business you love, well, we've got that covered too, because Kari is going to discuss how she dealt with the stigma of being a high school dropout and not going to college and succeeding with her business anyway. All this goodness is coming to you right now on episode 37 of the Startup Sessions. Welcome to the Startup Sessions show. I am very excited to have fellow Portlander, best-selling author, teacher, speaker, and master creative entrepreneur on the show today. Welcome, Kari Chapin.
Hi.
Hi there. So here's the story. I heard Kari speak at an event called Pioneer Nation earlier this year, and she was fantastic. And I just loved, Kari, the way you talked about what creative entrepreneurs deal with in creating and starting and succeeding as a business. And you gave away 4 pretty powerful takeaways at that event. So at that time, I really decided I've got to have Kari on the show at some point. So here we are today. I'm super, super excited about it. I'd like to start with a brief introduction. Kari writes books for creative entrepreneurs, and her 2 most recent books are Grow Your Handmade Business and The Handmade Marketplace. Kari also has a popular course on Creative Live called Start a Handmade Business, where she teaches people everything they need to know about breaking into the online marketplace with your handmade goods and sharing your work with the world. So some really powerful resources on Kari's website, and I will put all of those links on episode 37 at thestartupsessions.com so you can easily find them and connect with Kari. But I'm just super excited to dig into all the juicy details of what you have to offer here, Kari. But I think I'd like to start with a background question for you. How did you get started as a creative entrepreneur and then move to working with and helping other creative people start and grow their businesses?
Well, I was actually working as a buyer in a home goods store, and our focus was on green products, which back in the early 2000s was still sort of a new market. And Etsy had just come on the scene, and there was a lot of people who were using recycled or reusing materials in what they were making. So I started writing to these people asking if I could buy 20 of something to stock in my store, and a lot of people didn't get back to me. And I realized pretty quickly that that was because they didn't know how to work with me as a buyer. They were confused by the language I was using, like line sheet or wholesale cost, and they just weren't sure what was going on. And once I figured that out, I just started explaining to people what I meant, and after a while, it just became apparent that a lot of people needed this information, and rather than starting a blog about it, I pitched it to a publisher. And so that's how I really got into it, was actually with helping people online and then moving into writing a book about it.
Okay.
And then that quickly expanded into other opportunities because the book just wasn't enough. People wanted to hire me one-on-one to talk about their businesses, or people then were unsure about how to start a creative business. So it just sort of grew from the book, actually, and it just seems to be getting bigger all the time.
That's very cool. I love it. So you took it, I think, almost a different path than a lot of people do in recognizing that need or seeing that gap right away, turning it into a book, and then leveraging that into what you do today, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's different these days to do it. You need to have the audience first and then the book. But
Yes. Okay. So that's actually a great topic right there in and of itself, because I think a lot of people that are starting businesses, whether they're makers of handmade goods or whether they're entrepreneurs of another kind, is having that audience. And which
Mhm.
comes first? Do you launch your thing, or do you get your audience, or what combination does that fall into? What advice do you give to someone around building that audience, to someone who's fairly new or maybe just starting out as a creative entrepreneur?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of creative entrepreneur you want to be in.
Okay.
I think that planning is really important, knowing where your end goal is, whether that's a year from now or 5 years from now. I'm a big believer in that. And I know there's some um, discontent around the topic of planning recently in the online business community, but I'm a really big fan of that. So I think knowing where you want to end up and then working backwards from there to figure out what your steps are is pretty key. And that's really helpful. I don't think that you need to have an audience to have a successful business right off the bat, but I do think that you need to learn how to build your audience, surrounding yourself with community, whether it's like-minded entrepreneurs, absolutely customers. I think that that's all really important pieces of anyone's success these days, because there's so many options for buying things, which is wonderful, but also makes it a little bit harder. So the best community that you can build is definitely sort of my top advice. And of course, you want to have customers in that, you want to have supporters in that, you want to have colleagues in there, peers, as many people as you can get to rally around your business and your ideas, I think is pretty key. But I don't think you have to have that before you get your ideas out there,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. Do you have a favorite? I mean, you wrote a book, so maybe that's your favorite. I have a show and a podcast, so that's kind of my favorite. So we're probably both partial to our favorite ideas. But do you have any recommendations around like what platform or way to build your audience is tends to be the best for people, or
I
what's your take on that?
I think it really depends on your business. If you are making things by hand, I think that reaching people through your website and social media is really
Hmm.
important. And I think that's important for all of us and sort of gets overlooked, that a lot of times now people think a website is almost a given. But I think the care and nurture of your website and your web presence is really key. If your message is broad enough for a book, then I think that that's a great way to go. And there's all kinds of options for that these days: self published ebooks, turning your blog into a book, any way you can convert that information. If a book is your end goal, then you would really structure your online time around getting to a book.
Yeah.
I also am a huge podcast listener, so I've found so many people through listening to different podcasts. So, I mean, I think it's whatever is going to work for your community, really. I don't think, I guess what I'm really saying in a really long, rambly, stumbly kind of way is I don't know that there's a correct formula except for to know your community and know how they're going to respond to you. As somebody in the maker community, we do listen to podcasts because we need something to listen to while we're crafting or working. As a writer, I listen to podcasts because I need something. I have like two parts of my brain, and one part needs to be listening to something that's not distracting. So I find that to be public radio or podcasts versus music, which makes me stop and listen, look up lyrics, and think of another song. And, music doesn't work for me when I'm writing. So I think knowing your community and how they're going to respond best to you is actually the key. So once you
Okay.
really zero in who you're talking to, you'll know how they want to hear from you.
Okay.
I'm not
That
sure if that's really,
no,
really
that's
helpful, but
That's awesome. That is fantastic advice. I've never heard anyone really say it like that before. Like, kind of flip it around and know how your community likes to engage. Um,
yeah,
I
I think
didn't.
that's key.
That's super key. I didn't even really think about that before I started mine. I just kind of jumped in and have been pushing along and had some success. But I looking back, hindsight, like that's such great advice. If I would have had someone tell me, hey, you know what, take a look at your community and know what ways they like to engage and learn
Yeah.
and have interact with content. That's such a great idea. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad that worked because it was feeling really discombobulated coming out of my mouth. But I mean, if you made jellies and jams, then you would want to be where your community was. So maybe you
Yeah.
would be at the farmers market, interacting with your people face to face when they have, money in their pocket and they're looking to buy jam. I mean, I think it really depends on who you're trying to sell to and connect with, and
Yeah.
those answers can vary so greatly. My community doesn't really care so much to read anything on a blog from me, but they do care if I show up on Instagram.
Okay.
Like that's a place where they really like to connect, or on Facebook. Um, so I don't blog as much as I social media because that's where people want to hear from me when they're avoiding their work and they're, goofing off online. They want me to show up in their Facebook feed versus clicking over to my blog and saying, oh, now I have 20 minutes. I'm going to read this blog post.
Okay.
They don't want that from me. So,
Okay. That's
yeah.
like I said, that's such great advice. Knowing your community and how they like to interact with you. That could save somebody a lot of time. It really
It
could.
saves a ton of time. It
Yeah.
saves so much time. It saves so much effort. The time I spend not blogging is much better used in other parts of my business. But if I just thought like a successful blog means a successful business, then I would be wasting so much time because that's not what my community wants.
Uh
So
huh.
it's a huge time saver, and it's also a great way to let go of things that you just don't enjoy doing or like doing.
Yeah.
Instead of forcing yourself to do the kind of work that maybe you don't feel the best about doing, then let it go and find your people somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good stuff. But
Hmm.
when you start, like when I started blogging and started my show, honestly, like I started because I kind of thought that's what I needed to do. I thought if I want to have an online presence, I need to blog, and then the podcast and show came about, and thought I needed to
Hmm.
do that. And it's worked out that I enjoy that balance of writing and podcasting, and that's worked for me. But I think that's a really great process to think through. And, coming from your background and perspective with creative makers, just that bit of advice on, Instagram. I know my wife's a yoga teacher, and even she gets this huge following on Instagram because people, anytime, if your business has to do with something visual, like you're
Yeah.
making something or, you're doing something with your body or something, people want to see pictures of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
they
so
do.
and so knowing how to connect with them in that format is important. Cool.
Yes.
All right. Hey, Kari, this is a question I wanted to ask you that I was thinking of this morning. And this is my experience that many makers and creative types and creative entrepreneurs, they often don't have a plan for their ideas. And you started to kind of mention the importance of having, some sort of structure in their business. And I've even heard people say, you know what, if I really structure it too much, it's going to suck the creativity and the spontaneity out of my ideas. And I kind of get that, but at the same time, like I find for my business that having structure and clarity almost frees my mind to get
Hmm.
even more creative once I kind of know where my business is going and have some
Right.
framework around that. So I was curious to find out a little bit more your perspective on how you advise, your clients, makers and creatives, like how to put structure around their business early so that they can, move forward with some purpose. What's your
Sure.
perspective on that?
Number one, I think if you own a creative business or you're a creative entrepreneur, and I think you can be a creative entrepreneur and not have a business yet. So people know if they have the entrepreneurial spirit and drive. It's
Yeah.
in us. And if you have it, you definitely know it. And I think one really important thing for people to realize is that they are the boss. You are the boss of your business. If your business starts to feel stale and your creativity is limited, then change it. You don't have to sit around and think, oh, I've put so many parameters and boundaries on what I'm doing that now I can't move freely in my business. Of course you can. You're the boss. duh, just change it. It's really simple, but I think boundaries and parameters and goals are really helpful because as creative people, well, creative people like me, I guess is really what I should say. We have a million ideas and a million things we want to do. And I really suffer from something called and I'm not sure if it's really called this, I'm kind of making it up, but like idea paralysis. That there's so much that I want to do, so many things I want to write, so many people I want to talk to, so many products I want to launch, so many things I want to say. That once I really think about all those things, I just sit down and watch Shark Tank like for a whole day because I've got myself so overstimulated that I can't really move forward. Once I simply just set a goal, then everything falls into place. And if I don't like where it's going, then I just change it. So knowing where I want to be 3 years from now is incredibly important to me. And how I get there, that's really flexible and fluid. And if I change my mind about my end destination, that's okay too, because I'm the boss. So
Yeah.
I think that so many people want to have their own business because they're really looking for freedom or independence, or they really want to do something for themselves. But then they end up really restricting themselves and their progress by thinking there's a formula that they have to follow to be successful. And then if that formula feels bad to them, then they get stuck and they stop, or they decide this isn't going to work rather than pivoting and trying a different direction to get to the same place. I mean, I can think of 10 ways right now I can get to the closest grocery store to my house. And that is sort of like what owning a business is like. You know where you're going, and there's so many different ways you can get there. And giving yourself the freedom and the ability to move around and all that to whatever's working for you today, whatever's going to work for you next month or next year, I think is really key. That we forget we're in charge. We get to decide if something sucks or if something's not working or if something's stifling, and then just change it. But you will not be able to figure that out if you don't try things and if you don't grant yourself permission or give yourself that freedom to move around in your own business the way you would in anything else, your friendship, your marriage, your religion, your free time, your hobbies. It's they all have one thing in common, and that's you. You get to decide.
Yeah.
So really focusing in on that and redefining how you think of success or how you think of failure, I think is really the biggest part of it. I mean, it's all really up here.
Yeah.
And and I spend so much time up here that, it sort of feels really clear to me. But if I'm stuck or feeling stifled in my business, I definitely know why. It's because I'm doing something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
So, or I have a deadline that I don't want to meet, or a project I should have said no to, but instead I said yes to. And if I say yes to things I don't really want to do, I know, and this is embarrassing, but it usually has to do with my popularity. I think it's going to make me look better, or there's money on the other end of it that I would like, even if I don't want the work. So really knowing what makes me feel cramped and boxed in my business, and then figuring out how to maneuver around that is really important. And I think it takes a lot of practice too. I don't think that it's as easy as just saying, I'm definitely going to do everything that comes my way, because that's our first instinct. But really learning what motivates you and how you, and just the fact that you're free to move around as you see fit is amazing. It's really freeing, and planning is important. I mean, if we didn't, we do it in all areas of our lives, but for some reason we treat our businesses like really different. And I think that's because there's such an emotional impact there that figuring out how you work is really important to figuring out how you're going to be successful and happy.
And happy. Happiness is so big. I mean, that's one thing I find too, is like the reason that many of us go into business for ourselves. I mean, the motivator, I'll speak for myself, was to have more freedom, more flexibility, and enjoy what I do. Yet I've found in just the course of the last year that I've started, doing what I do, is that I'll find myself like locked into this like way of doing things. And then I'll ask myself, what am I doing here? I made this leap to like have, more freedom and more enjoyment. So it's very much a feeling thing, I think, to start to get into this rhythm of what it means to be an entrepreneur, why you did it, and continually reconnect with that to make sure you're enjoying the process, for God's
It's so
sakes.
true. It's
Yeah.
so true because another thing people really forget about that owning your own business is work. So, you have created a job for yourself and job means working and not every part of every day is like amazing. I don't spend every single one of my days like, I love this because there's whole parts that I don't love. And that's the part that's really work. But the parts that I do love definitely make up for that.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. Knowing why you did this to begin with is imperative.
Yeah.
And sticking to that and then changing that if you need to.
Yeah.
Everything evolves and hopefully our businesses are always evolving and our creativity too. So it's really important.
Yeah. So you brought up a good point there about, the things we do love and the things, maybe we don't love. What are the things that you currently love most about your business and what you do?
I love talking to people who find what I do to be really useful. So I am probably uh, fairly driven by the fact that people like working with me or people think that I'm helpful. So that's
Okay.
something that really works for me. And it was hard to admit that for a while because it made me feel conceited or weird or like I had a giant ego. But the fact of the matter is I don't do what I do so that people will hate it. I don't do this every day or write every day or publish books or make products for people so that they don't find them useful. So, really connecting with people one-on-one and listening to them and figuring out what they want and if I can help them get that is really key for me. I really thrive on those interactions with people. And
Yeah.
sometimes they come from social media, sometimes from one-on-one conversations or meeting people. But that really keeps me going is figuring out how I can be useful to a community that I really love and to a lifestyle that I really, really, really love and respect.
Okay. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's something also that many many people who are doing creative work often struggle with because after all, it's a risk to put your whatever out into the world. There's the risk of being judged on what you put out there. There's the risk of maybe having it fail. There's the risk of maybe having it be so successful that you have to decide whether to quit your corporate job and do that business full time. There's all sorts of risks associated with, putting your thing out there in a bigger way.
Yes.
And really realizing what about that you love to do and doing that and not being ashamed of it and really taking it out there. One thing that I remember from your amazing talk at Pioneer Nation was you talked about risk a little bit, and you shared a story about I'm not sure if it was your first book or your most recent book, but how you took a risk. Do you mind sharing that story with the viewers and listeners?
No, I don't. But can you tell me a little bit more about about what I thought the risk was, maybe? Because there's so many.
Yeah, you were talking about, if I remember right, you were just talking about risk in general, and
Yeah.
sometimes how you just have to put yourself out there. And I think you mentioned that you were at a party, and this person,
Oh,
this
yeah.
woman was there, and you took a risk. You didn't have your book. I forget what it was, but you didn't have some aspect of what you were talking
Right.
about completed. So you went home and worked all night
Yes.
long to deliver it. You took a risk.
Yes.
I remember that
Yes.
impacted me. Yeah. You know what I'm
Okay.
talking about?
I do.
Okay.
That is actually how I got the first book deal. Is I knew I was at a party and there was a woman there who I knew was a local editor of a publishing company, and I wasn't overly familiar with that publisher, but I knew what a book editor was and felt like that was just a good opening for me. And so I just walked right up to her and said, "Hi, my name is Kari Chapin. I have an idea for a book, and even if it's not right for you, could you take a look at my idea and tell me what you think of it, and maybe give me some advice or publish it?" I can't remember exactly, but basically I told her that I had a fully formed idea for a book, which I did have an idea for a book at the time. And she said, "Sure, send me your proposal tomorrow and I'll take a look at it and I'll give you some feedback. And if it's not right for my publisher, then I'll let you know and maybe I can give you some contacts." And I was like super, that's great news. But I really didn't know what a proposal was or what it was comprised of. So I left the party pretty much straight after that, Googled book proposal, found some examples online, and stayed up all night and wrote a book proposal. And I emailed it to her the next morning. And and that's really how it all began, because I did have an idea, and then I just decided to just do it, to just jump over that cliff and ask for help. And that idea was rejected. So so then I thought, oh, what a waste of time and energy, and I was really bummed out. And she said, this isn't the right idea for me, but I've heard you talk, and now I've spent some time with you, and it really seems like you're when you start talking about handmade people in business, you get so animated. You really love marketing. You really love talking about how people can grow their businesses. And I think there could be a book in that. And I remember saying to my husband, no, there's no books like that on the market. Nobody would really want to read a book like that. And I don't feel qualified to write that book. Like, I had a million reasons why that book idea was not going to work for me. And then that lasted about 24 hours until I said, yes, that's a great idea. And I totally could do that. It's what I talk about all the time. And so that's how the Handmade Marketplace came about. But it was definitely a risk to just walk up to somebody and say, help me, help me.
Yeah.
I want you to help me. But I do it all the time, and it always works.
Yeah.
Somebody always helps me.
Yeah. And just recognizing the brilliance of that. You know, it takes guts to do that. And a lot of people wouldn't do that because they would think, oh, you know what, I don't have my ducks in a row. I need to, I need to have a book proposal before I ask anyone about it. And I just love that. I just love the fact that that's a great example to me of how successful entrepreneurs work and how so many great things come about. You don't wait for everything to be perfect, because it never is.
No, and you're never really ready, and it's never really a good time. I mean, I have to be, I need a little bit of like what my husband calls brute force motivation. I have to sometimes like back myself up into a corner before I get anything done, because I let so many things get in my way emotionally, especially in the and starting before you're ready, saying that you are something if you know that you can fully do it. I mean, I remember when I started getting speaking jobs around the country, it's because I put on my website, hire me to speak at your event, and I really hadn't done a lot of professional speaking with speaker fees and things like that behind me. But, I definitely talked in front of crowds and felt like that was a good direction for my business to go in. So I just started saying I'm a speaker. And then I started booking speaking gigs, and it was as easy as that. Yeah. Once you decide that you're going to do something, commit to it fully, and then just let people know. And people will help you. They'll show up to support you if you ask for it, even in these indirect ways, by saying, I'm a speaker, hire me. Somebody will. Yeah. And then once one person does, another person does, and then before you know it, you're speaking twice a month, and it's great. If that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But until you make it legit and real, nobody can help you get anything accomplished if you don't put it out there.
Yes. I love that. I'm a big believer in simplicity, keeping things pretty straightforward. And, I just love that, commit fully and let people know. I just wrote that down. That's so simple, yet so powerful.
Good.
Thank you, Kari.
You're welcome.
One other thing on this show is that I'm all about really giving people permission to succeed at what they do, despite what society says that you have or haven't accomplished already. And one thing you mentioned, again, referring to the talk that you gave at Pioneer Nation, was that you had dropped out of high school and not attended college. You didn't attend college. And I was curious how you reconciled that, or even if you had to, or maybe even how you used it as fuel to succeed at what you do now. Because people come up with excuses as to why they should or shouldn't be successful. And, that could be one. And obviously you haven't used it as an excuse because you're succeeding wildly at what you're doing. So I want to get your perspective on that and share it with the listeners and viewers.
Sure. I let that stand in my way for a long time. I felt a lot of, especially as I sort of started becoming more well known and writing books. And, I was constantly afraid that somebody was going to be like, why should I read this book? Oh, I know why. Where did you go to high school? That I was afraid it would come up in conversations all the time. Like, oh, how old are you? In your 30s? Where'd you go to high school? And then I would have to like admit, oh, I didn't. So actually, I was embarrassed and really afraid of that part of my life for a long, long, long time. Because I was really afraid it was going to impact my credibility. And once I just decided, like, I'm so tired of worrying about this. I feel like I'm worrying about it every day. I don't know anybody else my age who spends so much time thinking about where they went to high school or college that I just need to let go of this. And so I forced myself to let go of it by just announcing to people, oh, I'm a high school dropout. I didn't make it through one semester of college. I tried, but it didn't work for me. And once I just started saying it out loud and putting it out there and realizing there was the reaction that most people had was more like, whoa, and you write books now? Or, whoa, you don't, live under a bridge? I mean, once I sort of figured it out that people were not, they just didn't care. But I really assumed that everybody cared where I went to high school. And one time I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to start keeping track of how many times I asked people where they went to high school. And I never did. I never said to anybody, where'd you go to high school?
Yeah.
So once I sort of figured out that it was really in my head and it was holding me back, it was heavy, it was weighing me down, I was really stressed out about it, then I just decided to drop it into every conversation that I possibly could as a way to get past it. And that's what actually worked for me.
Yeah.
So it's only been in the past 5 or 6 years or so that I felt really comfortable telling people I didn't go to high school or college. And part of that is because I felt like some sort of part of me that should be normal or that people could really relate to or that was standard was really missing. And I've spent a lot of my whole life, not just my adult working life, feeling like, just as you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, that I sort of did things backwards with writing a book and then developing work around that. I've lived my whole life backwards. So I have sort of done everything against the grain, from leaving home at 15 to dropping out of high school to not doing things the way they traditionally go down. And once I just really figured out that I could be honest about that is when I maybe sort of started to accept it. So it did hold me back for a long, long time. And letting go of that was so freeing and so empowering that I think it's one of the best things I ever did for myself as a woman and as a business owner.
Yeah.
Is just being really clear with myself that didn't have any impact on my success. Whether or not I took a world history class when I was 17 really doesn't matter anything to what I'm doing now. But
Yeah. That's powerful, Kari. And
yeah, it was probably one of the more pivotal moments in my adulthood of finally just saying, no, I'm going to do things my own way. And I only am going to do things I like. And I'm only going to do things I feel like I'm really good at. And I was not really good at school. I can see now as an adult that I'm a really good learner, but I'm not really good with structure. I'm not really good with rules. I'm not really good with timetables. There's a lot of qualities that I do not have naturally, and learning to work with that has been really key. If that makes any sense.
It does. I think it's so great. I think that in and of itself is going to give a lot of people permission to drop some things that they may have been holding on to as excuses to not move forward. Yeah. So thank you very much for talking about that. I really appreciate it. Another thing that I often hear, and I've even had to face this myself. I don't know how natural it is for people that are starting a business. I'm kind of assuming that it's something that comes up for a lot of people, is that what I want to do has already been done before, or there's too much competition out there. That seems to be a common block for a lot of creative entrepreneurs, um, or even startups, even people wanting to start, software startup companies that I've spoken with have said, oh, there's already, that app's been done before, or, that creative idea has been done before. What's
Right.
your advice for people who come up against this and struggle with this?
My advice for that is to really take a good hard look at all the different areas of your life and find all the similarities that you can. And
Okay.
also, if you're letting something like that get in your way, then maybe you're thinking about the wrong idea.
Mm.
So if you're constantly finding an excuse not to make something happen or a good reason, even if it feels really valid, if you're coming up against that all the time, pay attention to that because maybe that's just not something you want to do. However, if it is something you want to do and you're really worried that it's been done before, start noticing all of the similarities in your life. Like one of my favorite ones to talk about to people is shoes, because even my husband has more than one brand of shoes, or more than four pairs of shoes. There's all sorts of examples in our life where we need more than one thing from more than one person. So if you have five cookbooks, maybe they each have a recipe for spaghetti marinara, but you don't look at a cookbook in the bookstore and say, well, this is a recipe for tomato sauce, so I'm not going to get that. I already have that at home. You
Hmm.
say there's a lot of other value here and this recipe looks really interesting and maybe I'll try it. The same thing goes for our business ideas and for products. We allow repetition in our lives in all areas, and for some reason our own ideas is where we think like, well, the buck stops here. Maybe the world is really going to let 200 companies make blue sweaters that come out every winter, but certainly there's not room for another one of this that I thought of.
Yeah.
Number one, we're not all so unique that we are going to bump up against those kinds of things all the time, and figuring out how to push yourself through it is what really counts. And if you are the kind of person who will read more than one cookbook or own more than two brands of black shoes or two blue turtleneck sweaters, then there certainly is room for you to do what you want to do in the world. I mean, imagine how terrible it would be if there was only one style of house or only one car that we could drive or only one option for a haircut. It would be a terrible, terrible place. If you
Yeah.
enjoy diversity in your own life,
Yeah.
chances are people are going to enjoy your diversity in your business product.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it's really just an excuse to say, I don't feel like I'm good enough to do this because this other thing is already way better. And if that's really your problem, then you need a different kind of help than trying to come up with a business idea, because you need to really figure out what is unique to you. But there's a book that's good for helping people figure that out too, and or an exercise. It is a book, but I know the exercise more, I think, and it's the Blue Ocean Strategy. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I'm not sure how it works.
Well, the very basic synopsis here, so everybody check it out if you really want to know the exact details. But the basic synopsis is in the example most frequently used in this and in the book is circuses. And so there's the Barnum and Bailey circus, and that had a big top, a striped red and white tent, animals, clowns. It had all of this stuff. And then when the Cirque du Soleil guys, which have a really fascinating business story behind that business, came into the marketplace, they said, oh, we're going to start a circus. And a lot of people who were either going to fund them, which was their country of Canada, were like, well, there's another circus that comes through. Why would we want to give money for this other circus? And so the Blue Ocean Strategy is Cirque du Soleil said, here's what makes our circus different. Our clowns aren't funny clowns with red noses on them. We have more acrobatics. So they listed all the things that makes Barnum and Bailey really popular, and then all of the things that they would offer that were similar, but that were going to be different enough to make it seem like a whole different business. So sometimes if you need real psychological proof that your idea is valid and worth it, even if there's other out there, really trying to look at it from a really clinical approach can make a big difference. But can you imagine how terrible it would be if there was only, one business book or one kind of computer, or, it would just be awful.
Yeah.
It would be awful.
Yeah, and for anyone who's seen a Cirque du Soleil show, I mean, I don't know the whole business story behind that, but I do know the brilliance and the creativity that's a part of all those shows is phenomenal. It's an experience that you walk away from with your hair blown back, just like, wow,
Yeah.
what just happened? And, to
Ex-
not have that as an option in the world, I can't imagine because I've been so entertained and so amazed and so
yeah.
awestruck by just the sheer creativity and talent. And
Right.
that's just one example. I love
Hmm.
that, Carrie. You're giving so many great examples and things for people to consider, because I do think we can come up with what seem like like legitimate reasons
Hmm.
not to move forward with a business or an idea when really
Yeah.
it might be an excuse. And we just need to like really get honest with ourselves and ask ourselves, am I just coming up with an excuse because I'm scared?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's really, excuse me, that's really all that is an excuse. It's just you putting something in your way from moving forward, which I am super good at. So I really, empathize with that
Yeah.
trait in people. But that's all it is an excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful stuff. All right. Very cool. I love this. I love this discussion with you. Um,
Good. Thanks.
we are winding towards the time to wrap things up, however. So it
Okay.
always goes fast.
Uh,
Um, I prepared a lightning round of questions for you.
yes,
Are you ready for that?
I am.
Okay, sweet. Let's dive into that. What's the most influential book for you, Carrie?
It's actually a self-help book, and it's called "Finding Your Own North Star" by Martha Beck.
Okay.
And I had it checked out the audiobook from the library about 7 years ago, and it actually got stuck in the CD changer of my car. It could have 5 CDs. So I listened to it for a whole summer. And I actually had to buy it from the library because I couldn't get it out of the CD player, so I never could turn it back in. Um, so after a whole summer of listening to that book on repeat, it really had a big effect on how I was going to live my life. And even
Yeah.
though it has nothing to do with business, it has everything to do with how I conduct my business and how I started conducting myself as a person, which allowed me to have a business. And
Okay.
so that book was huge for me. And even though I've bought the hard copy now, still I can start listening to the audio version and I feel very like, oh, it was really good for me in a lot of ways.
Great. All right. How about the best conference or industry event or why and why?
The best conference I go to is actually called Craftcation, and it takes
Okay.
place in Ventura, California, usually every spring. And it's a mixture of learning handmade skills and business classes.
Okay.
Next year, 2015, will be my third year in a row of going, and I love it. 500 women come down on this hotel on the beach in Ventura, California, and they're everywhere. They're knitting, they're embroidering, they're sewing, they're doing all kinds of things with their hands, and then they take really awesome business classes in between. And I really love the mixture of engaging this part of your mind with your business, but then also being able to dive into new handmade skills that you don't know or polish ones that you have. And I love that there's a place where you can go where you can actually say, like, stamping is a business or knitting is a business. And I find it to be really, 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 really incredible. I love that conference a lot.
Okay. Never heard of that one. And it
Yeah,
sounds,
I know it's probably a different one for your community, but I
yeah,
really like it a lot.
yeah,
I also
sound,
like several industry events. Like if you wanted to make products, I really recommend going to like New York Now or the gift shows if you can find them and go to them because there's a whole lot of connecting you can do and learning from just walking show floors if you want to make something that's mass produced or manufactured. I think that those kinds of experiences can't be undersold.
okay. Great. All right. How about the most effective strategy for growing your business?
It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, actually, which is having some sort of end goal or destination in mind and then figuring out how to work toward that. So what is it that you really want to accomplish? And you can have 3-month goals, 5-year goals, whatever works for you. There's no rules because you're the boss. But having some place that you want to get to will help you get there versus saying, I want to make $40,000 this month. That's really wobbly and undefined and hard to figure out. Like, how are you going to do that? The how is the end destination. And that's, by selling XYZ. And I really think that that's imperative.
Okay.
Having
That's
a
great.
direction.
Great. Favorite business tool or resource?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this quite a bit, Michael, because I wanted to have some great app or something to recommend. And I really have to say that my favorite biz tool or resource is other people. I have an accountability partner and we check in with each other once a week. We send long emails to each other that break down what we want to accomplish that week by, we both happen to do this, but by the section of our business. So I might say book work or list the publishers I'm working with and what I have to do that week. And my accountability partner has really been key. I've only been doing it on a weekly basis in 2014. And I think this year we've skipped about 6 weeks, and I can look back in my calendar and see that those 6 weeks that I did not engage the power of my accountability partner were the most useless 6 weeks for my business of the year. So I think that being accountable to somebody and sharing your vision, putting it out there, even in that really small, private, confidential way, is really key. And another resource that I use in my business is co-working. I have a friend, we meet at a coffee shop once a week. We work for about 4 hours, and it's amazing. I mean, I work in my home all day long, all by myself, and just getting another person physically who's also working is a really great resource for me. So
Okay.
no apps or tools really, but other people are really instrumental to me.
That's you're the first one to talk about that as a favorite resource or tool. And I love that.
Sorry.
I think
Okay.
I think it's so important and something that's often, not brought up because people are thinking about, little tools and shortcuts and stuff. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. So I'm a big proponent of adventure and bringing that into your business and your life. So I love this question. I always look forward to the answer. What's the most recent exciting adventure that you've taken part in, or what's your favorite hobby, or maybe some combination of the two of those things?
Hmm. I would say that my most recent adventure was actually driving across the country to move to Portland with my husband. That was a really, we did it in a short amount of time in my old Volvo station wagon, which was an adventure in itself because we were a little bit like, come on, car, you can do it. You can get to Portland. And we had our 2 dogs and our cat in the car with us. And it was really amazing to drive through Montana with my whole little family in the car and windows down and music playing. I mean, it was really great. And we stopped off at a lot of fun places like the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. It's a building where the whole outside of the building is redecorated each year in just corn. So these amazing intricate patterns and murals made out of single kernels of corn. It was really incredible, but that was probably the best big adventure that I've had recently.
Okay. And you were coming from Vermont, right? So
Yes.
yeah, that's no small venture.
No, that was a big one.
With 2 dogs and a cat and your husband and all your stuff in the car.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good adventure.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. It was very freeing and motivational, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful to get out of your head and to see where you live or where you're from. So
Yeah.
it was a really good experience. I love a good road trip.
That's a good one.
Mhm.
Great. All right. Well, that wraps up our lightning round, Kari. Tell our viewers and listeners what's up next for you. What are you most excited about in your business right now?
I am most excited about a couple of things, but I'm actually starting a podcast. So I'm really
cool.
excited about that. I have a background in public radio, and I'm excited to sort of combine the work I used to do with a podcast in The first one will come out in August, and so I'm pretty psyched about that. And then I have my own product line coming out next spring for creative entrepreneurs, and these are actually tools and tricks that I sort of have used over the years that I figured out how to formalize and got a publisher to agree to produce them and to release them to the marketplace. And so that's not until the spring, but we're in that really fantastic phase of a project where I'm seeing mock-ups and the colors and the actual design. And so every time I get an email about that, I feel really, really psyched. But those will come out in March of next year.
Okay.
And there's 3 different products, and I can't wait for that.
Exciting. So if people want to be notified of your new product line, what's the best way for them to be notified of that?
To go to my website, karichapin.com, and that's Kari. So that throws people off a little bit when I just say Kari out loud.
Okay.
But karichapin.com, and to sign up for my newsletter. And if you do have any hand makers or crafters listening in, you'll get an autoresponder email after you sign up that invites people to join a private Facebook group where we have almost 500 members. This came from my Creative Live. This was an incentive I offered for my Creative Live course, How to Start a Handmade Business. But in this private Facebook group, there's almost 500 members now, and they are so awesome in there, giving each other tips and tricks and feedback and reviews and help on everything from product descriptions to photographs to idea generation to talking to your family about how you actually are working, even if it just seems like you're crocheting all day long. That it's a really fun thing. So whoever signs up for the email letter gets invited to that. But so people are welcome to request membership there. Okay,
fantastic. So I'll make sure to link up your website so that people can have that right there under episode 37 at thestartupsessions.com.
Thanks.
Great. All right, Kari, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining today and sharing your wisdom and knowledge about all things creative, all things about building a business and getting started and overcoming a lot of those hurdles that often impact us as we're getting our businesses, creative or otherwise, off the ground. This has been phenomenal.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish you all the best. One more thing. Do you have the name for your new podcast so people can find it?
Yep. I think it's going to be called AIM, AIM, and that stands for Action, Inspiration, and Motivation. So AIM with Kari Chapin.
Perfect. Okay, great. Look forward to that. All right, Kari, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll see everyone and be listening for a new episode next week on the Startup Sessions. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I don't know about you, but I thought that discussion with Kari was off the charts valuable. Kari really knows how to break things down in such a simple and easily understood way. I found it so valuable to hear how Kari built her community, and I just wish I would have known some of those things when I was first starting out in business. It would have saved me so much time and energy. And the simple idea of letting go of the things you don't enjoy sounds easy, but we often need to hear it from new perspectives to really understand that when we're the boss, part of that responsibility includes being true to ourselves and not doing things just because we think we're expected to do them. And then my favorite piece of advice was to get started before you're ready, because we're never really ready. And the quicker we get started on launching our idea or our business, the quicker we can be contributing to the world in a way that makes us feel alive. Thank you so much for listening. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to head on over to thestartupsessions.com for a full recap of all our episodes, including links to amazing resources for each guest, thoughtful and provoking blog articles, and many other great resources. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And if today's guest can create a meaningful business and achieve a life of freedom through a business with soul, why can't you?